Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In fact, it's wonderful to be here today to talk about the Appropriation Bill No. 1, 2015-16 and related bills. And following on from the previous speaker, I will be outlining the plans that we, the Coalition, have for the future. And it's wonderful to have my good friend, the member for Mayo here, who has been strategising these great plans to get Western Sydney moving again. The $50 billion infrastructure that will actually create so many jobs for the people of Western Sydney. But I guess for those opposite, jobs aren't that important. So, Deputy Speaker, it's wonderful to be part of a government that is building a stronger Australia. And you know what? The 2015 budget is that very next step to ensure the long-term economic growth to build a stronger, safer and more prosperous future for all Australians. I probably don't need to remind all of us in the House, the legacy of those opposite. The $667 billion gross debt that's projected to rise. But you know what, Deputy Speaker? I like to look at the positive sides. And in the words of Winston Churchill, difficulties mastered are opportunities won. To grow our economy, we must grow jobs. To create jobs, we must look to the sectors and find the opportunity. I agree with Professor Michael Porter. Innovation is a central issue to economic prosperity. And you look right across the packages and the programs that we're wanting to bring in to create innovation and smart jobs for the people of Western Sydney. That is exactly what this budget is all about. If we look at the small business package, the smallest small business package in our nation's history, that will reduce taxes and create opportunities. Deputy Speaker, it was really wonderful to have the Minister for Small Business in Lindsay on Tuesday last week. It was so well received that he was able to meet and talk with so many of the small business people in Western Sydney. Under those opposite, over 500,000 jobs were lost in small business. That is just not sustainable. But it's not just in small business where we need to look for jobs. I'd also like to applaud the work of the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Alan Tudge, who came out to Lindsay only a few weeks ago, where we conducted an Indigenous business forum, talking with local Aboriginal people who are making their own way, building their own businesses, creating other employing other Aboriginal people. It was wonderful to see that spark. And you know what, Deputy Speaker? After the meeting with the Parliamentary Secretary, that group of 20-odd Aboriginal business owners in Western Sydney are now wanting to build their own Aboriginal Chamber of Commerce in Western Sydney. That's the opportunity that this budget and the programs from this side of Parliament provide to the people of Australia. But I go to the next very big piece, the government's $50 billion infrastructure program. And to have the member for Mayo here today, who will be the architect of much of this investment, it's actually quite timely that he's in the chamber right now. Much of that will be spent, and a lot of that will be spent in Western Sydney. If I look at some of the reasons why, particularly under those opposite. Now, Philip O'Neill, who's a professor at the University of Western Sydney, made an address on the 19th of April 2013, where he stated that between 2006 and 2011, that the region of Western Sydney lost 6,842 jobs in manufacturing. In fact, the electorate of Lindsay will see less than 5% traditional manufacturing. No longer can we look at Western Sydney as a place for traditional manufacturing. We need to think bigger, we need to think greater. And that's why working with partners like the University of Western Sydney to build an innovation corridor, jobs like biotech, these are going to be the sort of terminologies that we will speak about the people of Western Sydney. But this infrastructure spend will go further. It will invest $3.6 billion into a roads package that will be shared with the state government. This $3.6 billion road package will deliver so many jobs and create opportunities with organisations like the E.J. Cooper Group or BIDA, where they will invest over and above the value of their 280 hectares, $2.5 billion into the people of Western Sydney. The Science Park will create 12,200 jobs, 12,200 jobs in biotech, 12,200 jobs that will be in places like agribusiness and smart agribusiness. This is exciting news for the people of Western Sydney. Further, we'll be investing $1.1 million into the planning of the Northern Road from the M4 up to the Great Western Highway. This is an area that has caused so many challenges for so many people every day of the week. Further, the federal government is loaning $45 million to the state government to build the Werrington Arterial. Now, this will take a lot of pressure off the Northern Road intersections on the M4 as well as the Mamre Road intersections to the M4. The sod turning of that project was on the 9th of March. Further, a $35 million extension in Mulgoa Road that will help the pain point just outside the plaza under the railway bridge. That when this project's finished, the flooding under that railway bridge should be a far-gone thought of the past. Black spot funding, we have invested $160,000 for a single-lane roundabout at Phillip and Gascoigne Streets in Kingswood, $80,000 for pedestrian safety measures along Parks Avenue between Victoria Street and Werrington Street in Werrington, $60,000 to stop safety island at the intersection of Dunheved Road and Tasman Street in Cambridge Park, $60,000 for a median island and curve realignment on Kurrajong and Boronia Streets in North St Mary's, $40,000 for median island and stop signs at Terrybrook Road and 5th Avenue in Landilo. In fact, Deputy Speaker, $6.1 million on roads to recovery across the region. This is a fabulous achievement, and this will mean so much for all of us that live in Western Sydney. But, Deputy Speaker, the Innovation Corridor really is, I think, the most spectacular piece of what this government has achieved for the people of Western Sydney. The Innovation Corridor that will travel from Narellan through Penrith all the way up to the northwest growth sector, linking the northwest to the southwest. One of the pieces that has made this project of the Innovation Corridor so real has been the Free Trade Agreement and, in fact, the Memorandum of Understanding between the Beijing University of Chinese Medicine and the University of Western Sydney. The ability for the University of Western Sydney to commence clinical trials on Chinese medicines, to find ways to propagate or synthesise the active ingredients and then to be able to commercialise these medicines. This will create so many wonderful jobs for the people in Western Sydney. Working with the university that really does see a bright future for our region is very, very exciting. Further, the federal government have paired with the university and supported $3.1 million of 10 research grants. This is really important research. Additionally, the Werrington Park Corporate Centre, the first building of the Sydney IQ facility, predicted to have 6,000 jobs in smart jobs, again in biotech. This project commenced with a $13.573 million investment from the federal government and will initially employ 450 to 500 people. But, Deputy Speaker, Lindsay is a family community, and in Lindsay we are in fact one of the youngest electorates in the parliament. One of the things that we've been known as for a very long time has been our sporting prowess. We as a government have supported the families of Western Sydney and supported the families of Lindsay. We've been supporting the children to play the sports that they want to play. We've been upgrading fields right across the region, including Hickeys Lane Rugby League fields. We provided $45,000 to improve the playing surfaces. To the Andromeda Oval in Cranebrook, we've provided drainage and upgrade of the playing surface, another $25,500. For the Grey Gums Reserve, we've resurfaced the number 2 oval. We've built an awning and a clubhouse, another $60,000. $26,000 towards the Andrews Road Baseball Complex, where we've constructed fencing and also built some tiered seating. $20,000 towards the Hunter Fields at Emu Plains, where we've provided lighting so the children can now practice and play at night time. And of course $90,000 to the Jamison Park netball courts in both a shade structure and canteen upgrades. Now, this has been a wonderful achievement because a lot of people think that rugby league is the #1 sport in Penrith, but in fact it's our 3rd biggest sport. Netball comes in first, with soccer coming in second. Our netball courts in Penrith, they in fact, at Jamison Oval, they in fact attract many state and national titles that are played there. This is a great investment in netball for all young women who play netball right across our country. But we've also invested in all the different sporting champions who have played and represented our region right across the country, with some $4,500 in individual grants. They include people like Georgia Britton or Emily Imber, Chine Easthorpe, Samantha Thrupp, Amy Kellett, James Dare, Elise Izzard, Brennan Reimer, Amy Carlin, just to name a few. But when I talk about the entire sporting package, Deputy Speaker, I think the jewel of the crown goes to what will be the Western Sydney Community Sports Centre. Now, this Western Sydney Community Sports Centre will be essentially like an indoor rugby league field on a timber-sprung floor. Now, think about how many netball courts is that, how many basketball courts in that. But you know what? Not just as a sporting facility. This facility will once again be paired with the University of Western Sydney to come up with innovative sports science to ensure that we produce elite athletes in Western Sydney. But this facility will be the third biggest exhibition space in New South Wales once it's completed. Darling Harbour 1, Homebush 2, and this facility in Penrith, number 3. Having those sorts of high-level conferencing facilities available to the people of Western Sydney will do so much for creating jobs, once again, smart jobs for the people in Western Sydney. But, Deputy Speaker, we have done so much more. It was only on Tuesday last week that I had both the Assistant Minister for Social Services, the Minister looking after the NDIS, the Honourable Senator Mitch Fifield, and the State Minister for Disability and Aged Services, Minister John Ajaka in Lindsay, where together they signed a Memorandum of Understanding that will bring forward the rollout of the NDIS. It was so exciting to have these two men there signing something that's going to mean so much for children right across Western Sydney. In fact, the 2015 budget provides $20 million to fund the NDIS packages of up to 2,000 young people with a disability in the Blue Mountains and Penrith regions. Deputy Speaker, this is exciting news, and this is great news for parents and for children living with a disability, parents and their carers. I'd also like to thank Lisa Moffat for the Currumbie School, who is holding a parents' forum in the coming weeks to really help the transition for parents with children with a disability to transition into the NDIS. I'd also like to commend the work of the NDIA, who have already commenced operations in the Penrith region to help families transition to what is going to be a really wonderful program to help so many of our young people living with a disability. Deputy Speaker, with all this investment and growth going to the region, it's very important that we also talk about the environment and what that's going to mean. Well, we now have our green armies on the ground, and at the last election we promised to invest $15 million into the lands in Western Sydney to protect much of the Cumberland Conservation Corridor, or provide pieces that link essential areas of biodiversity together. I would like to thank the reference group that has come up with key pieces of land that we have acquired, and it was wonderful to have Greg Hunt out, the Minister for the Environment, out in Lindsay only a few weeks ago, where we had a look at the first pieces of land in Londonderry that will provide this connectivity. Now, these pieces of land really had been untouched for 30 years and was in very good condition. Large trees, wonderful habitat for so many of our wonderful native flora and fauna. But further to this, we'll be seeing 1 million trees planted in Western Sydney. Now, this is very good news for the environment right across Western Sydney. But of our 15 Green Army teams, I would like to thank the works of the Darubbin Land Council and also Maru Midiga, who have been providing training and opportunity to so many local Indigenous men and women who have and are participating in these Green Army programs. It's nice to see the synergy of these different groups working together and also providing the essential needs to the environment in Western Sydney. Deputy Speaker, I could go on. There is so much more to talk about. I mean, for instance, we held an ice forum recently, where we were attended by over 100 people from the local community coming out to talk to us about how we can really meet the scourge of ice and end it in Western Sydney once and for all. Over the coming days, we, with this community of experts, will be producing a report, a 28-page report that we'll be handing to the National Task Force. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you.